Thank you so much, Fielder Walton. That was really enlightening for myself as well, and also with town stats. Just a really great tool. If we're going to inform voters of how tax dollars are spent, these are critical tools to be able to do analysis and really save time and make the work a bit more efficient for the reporter. Before I introduce my panelists, they know they're about to get ready, I forgot to mention that this event is being made possible by the Rita Allen Foundation. We do offer these trainings for free to encourage hyperlocal sites to come together. It is really, Harry pitched the idea and the Rita Allen Foundation recognized the need for that. So I really want to give kudos to them for supporting this. And also, I mentioned the forms I handed out. If you turn them in, we give you a free book. That was the other thing I forgot to mention. So again, it's this answer the call form or the Hyperlocal News Association membership. Fill it out. I will give you a book when you exit the room today. So now it's my honor to introduce our panelists. If they want to start making their way up. First is Tom Neff. Tom Neff is the Director of Local Government Services at the Department of Community Affairs. For more than 18 years, Tom has worked to control government spending and rein in property taxes in New Jersey. He has experience in both budgeting and municipal finance. Before joining DCA, Tom was the Deputy Executive Director at the Senate Minority Office. He was a budget counsel to 2 governors. In his role as Director of Local Government Services, Tom is a force to be reckoned with. He is really making towns rein in their spending and making them more efficient. I'd also like Mike Lenz to come up. Mike is a former councilman and school board member and a veteran of Hudson County politics, having served as campaign manager in several Hoboken elections. On the professional side, Mike is a chief financial officer. He has served as the CFO in both Hoboken and Mansfield. Mike is a favorite here with the Citizens Campaign for his quick wit and no-nonsense political savvy, and he's always a dynamic speaker. We love having him. He understands the unique situation of both tackling the fiscal constraints as well as the political realities when dealing with elected officials and budgets. And finally, but not least, our girl, Gail Ferguson Jones. She is the editor of NewBrunswickPress.com. Before coming to the Hub City, she was the news bureau chief with the Star-Ledger and a special projects editor of the Courier News. Gail understands understands that when it comes to reporting on the municipal budget, it's all about the pocketbook. We taught a class for Rutgers students a couple of months ago, and she just said it's always the pocketbook. That's the one thing when you're reporting, get to the pocketbook and how it's going to impact your readers and their property tax bill. We were really fortunate to have her helming New Brunswick Press, our own hyperlocal experiment, and I'm really happy that she is here today. Just a note, we are going to hold all questions till the end. They're each going to give their own remarks, and then I'm going to invite Mark and hopefully Freeholder Walton if he is still here, and then I want to encourage a lively discussion after everyone's gone. So with that, I will turn it over. Tom, do you want to go first?
First, let me just thank the Citizens Campaign and everybody here. With the declining mainstream media and press, the sort of smaller, not so mainstream people who get information out to their communities are extraordinarily important. And I know how tough and challenging it can be to get information that you need to write the things you want to write about. It is not easy. I came to the Division of Local Government Services in September, and I felt a little bit like I was entering 1950s Eastern Europe. We have a computer system that is 30 years old. We have a budgeting system that still has questions on it that were clearly applicable maybe in 1963, but not applicable anymore. And we collect a lot of data. Sometimes we don't use it well and don't disseminate it well. And one of the things I would like to do, and I haven't had a chance to do it yet, is to figure out how do we get our computerized ability to disseminate information into the modern era. If we can't at least get it into the 2011, maybe we can get it into the 1990s. I don't know. We will try. With with that said, I know that Mark Magyar and his group have done a great job putting together information that you all learned about today. It's something that, frankly, the state probably should have done a long time ago and didn't. The freeholder from Hunterdon talked about it as well. They're doing it at their local level. Sometimes it's extremely difficult at the state level to gather data in a meaningful way that doesn't miseducate sometimes. What's true in Hunterdon County may not be true in Camden County, and what's true in Monmouth County may not be true in Essex County. And usually anything that's true in Hudson County isn't true anywhere on planet Earth. And different towns have different ways of not only doing things, but also reporting how they're doing things. Sometimes the clerk is also wears 3 or 4 different hats, so sometimes it's not so easy for a small town in particular to say, here's how much we spend on this given function or another given function, because, well, how do they allocate the clerk's salary if she's got 3 or 4 different jobs? So it's tough. We'll try over the coming year or 2 or 3, as long as I'm there, to try and do a better job at the state. We do have documents sometimes when all of you have trouble getting documents from your municipalities that we are happy to share with you. We have financial disclosure statements for your local officials and planning board members, elected officials, that we can give you if your local government isn't giving it to you as they should in a timely fashion. We can get you audits, we can get you introduced budgets, we can get you budgets. Whatever it is that you need to get a copy of that they're not providing, that they should be providing, we're happy to do it. And I'll give you my own personal email. I try and answer every email I get. And it's just tom.neff@tca.state.nj.us. I try and answer every email. If I don't know the answer, I try and give it to someone on our staff who does know the answer, and we'll try and get you whatever information it is that you're trying to get when it comes to looking at a municipality's budget. And I don't want to talk for more than a few more minutes, because I think it's more important to let people ask questions and have a process of give and take. But I would just stress that every municipality is different, but every municipality is facing the same challenges right now. State aid is essentially flat in some areas, in urban areas. The level of state assistance is going down a little bit. It's really put a lot of pressures on municipalities over time. And I have to say, I don't see it getting better anytime soon. I like to try and make sure people understand this, that going forward, the state's budget is in so much difficulty. It doesn't make its pension payment like all the local governments do. It has structural budget problems that are just astronomical. And the state's reliance on income tax, which is very volatile, makes it very difficult for the state to climb its way out of this hole in any kind of predictable way. While property taxes are very stable, by and large, the income tax, which it's stabilized on, is very volatile. It can go down 30% a year, it can go up 30% a year. But I think, as everybody knows, national economy, it's unlikely that our state income tax is going to be bailing us out anytime soon. And as the state gets more revenue, it's likely, more likely than not, that that revenue is going to be used to deal with some structural problems that the state's budget has, whether it's making pension payments or dealing with the transportation trust fund, which is underfunded, or trying to shore up the state's unemployment fund, which has no money and will borrow every year just to make ends meet. So in the coming years, if it's difficult now, it's going to be just as difficult next year and the year after, and maybe more so. So, people trying to get access to information at the local level and really holding their municipal officials' feet to the fire, trying to encourage them to not only refrain from doing the crazy things that sometimes you find when you're digging for information, but also encouraging them to do proactive, good, positive steps to make their budgets better. You need that data, and sometimes it's challenging to get it, but God bless you, I'm really glad you're all out there doing it. I spent a lot of my time in the minority in the legislature, and I've personally filed at least 2 lawsuits, I think maybe 3 or 4, against different administrations trying to get information when they wouldn't give it. When I was in the minority, we used to try and survey municipalities municipalities and ask for various types of information, receipts, vouchers, what do they spend on things like equipment or furniture or travel, what are they spending on their labor costs. Boy, is it difficult to get for information. Sometimes you have municipalities that just don't want to share it. So I mean, I understand your guys' level of frustration sometimes with government. I share it. We'll try and be one of those agencies, and there are many, but we'll be trying to be one of those agencies that's always as forthcoming as we possibly can with information when people need it. When you need something, you have a question, don't hesitate to shoot an email. If I don't hear of your concern or I don't know of it, I can't respond to it. And I sometimes won't be able to, but anytime we can, we will. So with that, I'll refrain from continuing to speak and let some others have their shot up here, and then we'll take some questions and try and do our best to answer.
Just an advertisement to agree with you. The guys at the Division of Local Government Services try and do a great job. But there aren't enough of them. I mean, there aren't enough of them to go around for the people in the county. There aren't enough of them to go around for the people in the municipalities, and there certainly aren't enough to go around for the citizens. Watching this happen right now is really exciting. It's really a group of organizations like Center for Civic Responsibility, and Mark Magner's group, whose name I can never quite remember, but working with citizens, because there aren't going to be enough resources statewide to provide all the information. People were talking about going to the municipalities and saying they have to provide this, they have to provide that, and that's useful in terms of standardization, because we should be doing work that can be compared one to another. But a lot of this is going to happen when people realize the value of the information itself. When I was 15 years ago, I was a big baseball fan, and I played rotisserie baseball. And baseball statistics weren't as available as they are today. And a group of people called Project Scoresheet got together and started collecting baseball information. And all of a sudden that information became available on an ad hoc basis. And the people who ran the major leagues realized that people needed that information and began making it available. Only through the process of beginning to use the information and having some success stories will there be the political will to demand that these things really get done. And how bad a problem is it? Well, there was a dig on Hudson County, and everywhere I go there's a dig on Hudson County. When I took my municipal finance course, I was taking the budgeting course. And I was sitting in a room with people from all around the town, all around different towns. And the teacher said, if you overspend the municipal budget, it's against the law. And I raised my hand and I said, what happens to you? And he said, it depends. And I said, depends on what? And he says, depends on where you are. And I said, what does that mean? Like if you overspend by $500,000, what happens? And he said, well, if you're in Morris County, you might go to jail, and if you're in Hudson County, they'll give you a medal for budgeting pretty well. But it's not just Hudson County as the joke in New Jersey. It's New Jersey as the joke of the United States. I mean, I read The Economist, and they say that New Jersey is fighting for Louisiana as a model of bad example. In the school boards, they use GAAP accounting. We use OCBOA, an other comprehensive basis of accounting, which is something that is not really understood. It's financially sound, but it's not very transparent. I mean, the first time I picked up a 66-page municipal budget, and I'm a CPA and I've been a numbers guy all my life, 10 years ago, I had no clue what was going on. And I think at some level that was originally by design. There is a closed circle of New Jersey financial information. In order to audit a New Jersey municipality, it isn't good enough to be a CPA. You have to be an RMA, a registered municipal accountant. That's a small club. There are only 566 municipalities, and they aren't making any more. So they don't want to have too many registered municipal accountants. It's a test that if someone sits down and takes it, thinking they know what they're doing, they're going to get killed. Some years we have one pass, some years we have none pass. It's a very difficult club to get into. And you guys are breaking at the doors. This is the cutting edge of what's going on. When we start getting real numbers out there, situations like what Harry was talking about in terms of the overpaying for insurance, once light of day is shown on them, they can't stay. They don't continue. Once people know what's going on, they can't continue. So this is a process where you're coming here and getting information in a digestible form, not the 66-page budget document that people can actually use and compare. But at the same time, there's a responsibility incumbent on you. And that is, if it's not making sense, if it's not working in a way, these guys will listen to you. Give them feedback, talk to them. The thing is a work in progress. If there are errors, if there are things that aren't helpful, that's got to come back in the other way. And I'm going to sit down and talk and answer your questions, but if anyone needs to get a hold of me, Heather knows how to find me, and I'm pretty good about answering questions if down the road we need to do that.
Seeing all this data today reminds me of my cub reporter days at the Courier News. The first time I was sent out to cover municipal government in Warren Township, Watchung, Glen Gardner. Thank goodness they started me out at that level. We didn't have town stats. We didn't have as was mentioned earlier, it's not easy to get information out of officials, even though it's open and public. And so I go to my first meeting where there's a discussion of the budget, and I return, and the editor starts asking questions. And so she says, well, how much is the budget? And I tell her, and then she says, well, is the budget, or is it up or down? And I'm very proud of myself, and I say, oh, it's up a little bit. And she says, well, what's a little bit? And then the more questions she asked, the more dispirited I got, until I slunk to my desk and realized I didn't know anything that I needed to know as a journalist about what all this information means. So we're going to get to the journalism part now. How do you use town stats? How do you use all this to report it to the average citizen? And as hyper-locals now, we're doing what the bigger media did for a long time, which was put this information on the record for the public and make it available to them so they don't have to decipher town stats, and we can sort of deliver the basics of what they need. They don't have to go line by line. They can, take 3 minutes out of their day and figure out the pocketbook issue, because when we're talking about a budget and our readers, really what they want to know is how much is this going to cost me? And so that's the job of your job as a journalist, is just to explain to them what it's going to cost them, why it's going to cost them that much, how it's going to cost them that much, and maybe they might want to vote some people in or out based on that information. So we're putting the information on the record, and we want to start out with basically not just is the budget up or down, but is the tax rate up or down? That's the first thing that people who pay taxes want to know. The budget actually can be up and not really cost you more. So, clear understanding of how much of the budget is raised by taxes, not the entire budget amount is raised by taxes. So how much is the actual tax levy? Then we want to break that down into the tax rate. How much is the tax rate per $100 of assessed value? Now, again, when the editor asked me, I was very proud. Oh, it's, I don't know, we'll just say $3.25 per 100. Well, but how much is that for a taxpayer? How much is that for a property owner? So we want to dig a little deeper, and we want to find out what the average tax assessment for the homes in the town are. And then we can actually give the owner of a $100,000 home how much they're actually going to pay in tax that year. Or we can give the owner of a $450,000 home how much they're going to pay. And we put that in the lead. So maybe they don't need to read anything further. Maybe they don't want to know how much the secretary is getting, how much you're spending on environmental commission issues, how much the building code. Let's not, make them have to go to college to figure this all out. Let's just tell them the things that are most important to them without them having to go to town stats to see if we know what we're talking about, even though we still want them to have access. Once we designed that, a few things that were said were really important, and that's like comparative information. So when we're putting this on the record for this year, as hyperlocals continue to report on the record year after year, people will be able to see compared to last year. And we also use our last year's information to write our this year's story on taxes. So we can, say it's up $30 per household, it's up $2,000 per household. Again, the basic information at the top of the story so people will understand what this has to do with them. Also in comparisons, you do want to look a little deeper, so you can look at salaries and all, starting with, because usually the biggest part of operating expense is human resources. But it's always interesting to, start a little friction, like did the mayor and the council give themselves a raise? That's probably hidden in there, but you want to juice it up a little bit so people will see what's going on. You have to do the math. And then you always verify your math by asking. Ask the finance officer, the controller, the clerk, the business administrator. But, I would always make it a practice. You always should sit down or call the business administrator or the finance officer. And, you can't ask enough questions. That's the point of the editor asking you questions. That's why you have editors. You don't self-edit, because you have to ask, and they are public officials, and they are answerable to you. You don't have to be a journalist. All you have to be is a citizen, and they do owe you an answer. So, in all fairness, you have to ask the questions. Don't just take the information and make assumptions. So ask as much as you can, confirm as much as you can, double check as much as you can, out of all due respect and fairness to your readers, and for the sake of accuracy, you should always ask as much as possible. There's no bad questions. And lastly, and it's just a little editor's pet peeve, you want to write in an active voice. You don't want your writing you don't want people to get bored. So, one thing that drives me crazy is to see there's a tax increase or decrease. No, it jumps, it climbs, it falls, if there's a tax hike, things that give the writing a little punch and really draw a picture in the reader's mind of what's going on with the taxes. And it just makes everything more concise and to the point, and people have the basic information they need. Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to handle the Q&A. Gail, it's great to, after like emailing back and forth on the story earlier this week, it's great to meet you. Questions for anyone? Yes.
Yes, I have a question for Tom. Mark had mentioned a comment about headcount. And as a former budget director myself of a public company, one of the most important things to look at was trends in headcount and by department, which apparently you can't get that. But what is the requirement in the municipality to look at current headcount or historical headcount? So rather than look at 60 pages, I can see where people are going. That is a huge piece of the budget. So you can respond to that?
Yeah, the information just isn't there. I think Mark said it, the municipalities aren't required to report to the state in any kind of meaningful way what the head count is by department. If you were to go to the Department of Treasury, they collect pension data, so they know for every municipality how many employees there are that are in the pension system for that municipality. But even that sort of macro picture of how many people are working for a municipality isn't always accurate, because there may be authorities. One municipality may have an authority, another may not, so comparing becomes difficult. Now we have a system where there are different types of retirement funds, the DCRP, defined contribution retirement plan, for certain appointed officials. So they don't show up as part of the pension data that Treasury may have for PERS or PFRS, the pension systems for regular employees or public safety employees. And it's extremely difficult, and it's a frustration that I share. I mean, one of the things the division is required to do is we take applications from towns that are in distress, and they ask for money. We say, we need money, we're in distress. And one of the first questions we ask is, how big is your workforce? Has it grown over time? Has it not grown over time? And it's shocking to me that sometimes a municipality will say, well, we don't even have that information. And it takes time for them to put it together because they haven't been looking. And they haven't been looking at it in a meaningful way. Some towns are better than others. Some towns are not. At the state level, the state portal information site, you can see department by department, division by division, how many employees are there. And going forward, you'll be able to compare that year after year. The flying is decreasing. I know for my division, it went from 120 to 40 over the last 10 years. You look at a town like Patterson, which came to us and asked for $70 million this year. It was difficult to find any kind of public records that would help us understand what that count has been. And that is one of the things that we want to try and help make more transparent. And I'm not 100% sure what the best way to do it is yet, because like I said, sometimes there are employees within a smaller municipality that wear multiple hats, and it's hard to break them down and get comparisons from town to town that are consistent and meaningful to see which, where the growth is or isn't. But it is something that we will get. And I would stress too that about 4 or 5 years ago, a law passed that required the division to implement sort of a user-friendly budget the municipalities are supposed to put together. The division just never did it. There are all sorts of laws that get passed. At the same time, the division has fewer employees to do things. We're asked to do more because sometimes they don't get done. It's not an excuse, it's just a reality. But one of the things I would really like to do over the next year is come up with what is that user-friendly budget that every municipality has to put together that's in a meaningful way. And one of the things I think has to be known is exactly that, the headcount. It's where half or more of the money is going, and no one has a handle on it.
Can I jump in here just for a second? It's a great question, and I've thought about it a lot. I've actually gone through the process of operating towns to try and develop headcounts and built them offline because the town didn't have them. But this is analogous to another situation, and I think that might be a way out of it, and I'd like to offer this as a suggestion. About a decade ago, nobody knew what their costs were for retirement, their terminal costs in municipalities. And then a local finance notice came out, and the division started requiring an estimate of what that number was. And I was working in the town, and at that time, we calculated it for the first time because they required it. We have a 66-page document that requires, by category, the salaries and wages for each department within the municipality. If, just as a simple first step, the division were to require that when you go through the exercise and have it in front of you and calculate $473,000 for the parks workers, you at that moment in time know how many parks workers you just figured out. And if you require 4 to be written in for the number of parks workers, or 4 2/3, if there's an allocation that you did, because if you did the number, you figured out at that moment how many people that number is. If the division would require that number to be disclosed, and then that number would be total, just like the salaries total to the total salaries and wages, that number totaled to the total personnel in the municipality, and that had to be verified, that one change would be huge. So I'm throwing that out as a thought.
But I guess I would say that would be my follow-up. To fix what seems to me is the most fundamentally easy thing to fix. Can it be done through Department of Community Affairs, or does it have to be done legislatively or somewhere? The fact that we don't have a head count, which of course I, as a dumb citizen, I didn't know that until I tried to get it.
I just want a follow-up by that. The department can require by a regulation what goes into the budget, so it could be done in that way. I think that's an excellent idea. I'd like to make an offer also. The easy-to-use budget is what we're talking about here, and I know we could pull together a working group. I'm sure of Freeholder Walton, Ray Caprio at Rutgers, other Rutgers experts, municipal officials, John Rand at the Lake, who I've worked with on, who's critiqued our project. We could pull together a working group and work with you and Mark Pfeiffer to put this together. And we would also be more than willing, because we have recognized DC, a division of local government services is very good and very understaffed. Just has some real pros there, but we'd be more than willing to compile the electronic budget submissions of the state, so that there would be no cost to the state of doing this. I mean, this is an offer we would certainly be able to make. So that's something we should talk about.
The dirty little secret is that the budget submission is not acceptable until the Division of Local Government Services says it's acceptable. So at some level, if they say we require this, then municipalities got to do it.
Payroll processing doesn't have this information that it should be done to the payroll department.
They have it, but it's not tied into the budget.
Right.
I know that they would tell you how many employees, they would even tell you where they live.
Let me share my own personal experience on that. 2 years ago, I was in the minority, and we did a survey of, let's say, 20, 30 municipalities. We said, give us a copy of your payroll as of January 1st this year, January 1st the previous year, January 1st the year prior to that. Who's on your payroll, how much do they make, what's their base salary, and what's the division that they work in. And we got a pretty good response from probably 2/3 of the municipality. And then there was another third who said, well, we outsource our payroll, we don't really have the data. If you want the data, you have to pay $600 for it. Different municipalities will respond to that question in a different.
But they have the information.
They
The
do.
person who told you that had it outsourced didn't want to make the phone call to the person that they were outsourcing.
That's true, and some of their contracts with their payroll processors, and particularly some of the smaller tests, they may have to run a special report under their contract with that, to get the information in ways that you're looking
It's not that.
for.
I think it's
I'm not defending it, believe me.
I
But
think it's.
there are ways to get the information.
I think it's
Well,
logical
what
to use
time
the
do
budget.
they report?
I think it's a logical, as you say, to do it as some part of the budget process, because then they would be doing it and they would not be paying extra for extra reports, as you said. We might not be able to get all the back data, but at least we could get this going forward.
And I would just caution you too, data's never perfect, and people who use data frequently lie. But one thing to look for and think about when you're looking at payroll too, is just understand that sometimes a municipality will put someone who is effectively the same thing as an employee on as a vendor, and they wind up not showing up. So one town may have someone listed as an employee, somebody else may show as a vendor. So if you're not careful on how you ask for information when you're looking for it,
It's a start.
you can miss it. So it's just something to think about when you're looking for that type
But I
of
do like ADP and paychecks, and they're very responding to give you information as far as what department, where they're located, when they quit, when they were hired, and their salaries, and they can prove it for you. So you might be given a lot of that.
I'm going to Bill first and then to Steve. Bill? No, I'm sorry. I can't read. Are you, okay.
No, I had no question, I'm sorry.
Steve, I'm sorry.
For overall, when do you get this data? As soon as you put it all out to the 20-plus municipalities, and when did that happen, and what's been the reaction?
It took about 6 weeks to get all the budgets in, and about 2 months. No, it was as they were coming out, it's probably about 8 weeks in total to get it all compiled onto the Excel spreadsheet. Fortunately, as the mayor of Hampton, I knew our auditor, and the auditors had PDF versions of most of the budgets, so our auditor was the auditor for about 12 other towns. He emailed them to me right away, and then it just got slowly getting the other ones. The most difficult to get was the town next to mine, which was 500 yards from my house. I just never got around to driving over there. If I needed to go and sign the open request like any other citizen and have it handed to me as a copy, as a hard copy. Most towns are very willing to do what I thought I was up to. It's a small community. I am afraid of where they knew me, so I was able to.
But how long you completed this study, and how long has it been out? And what has been, any of the towns go, oh my gosh, we're too high, too low, what's going on?
We first showed all of this to the mayors, all 26 mayors. We had to be invited. I think 20 mayors showed up, 3 of them met with me privately. For the most part, they were all very encouraged and understood where we were going with it, and weren't upset or aggravated, which was expected to be the result I would expect. A handful of mayors, one of the mayors, the highest paid of any mayor, sent an email saying, I don't take benefits, and why are you highlighting my pay salary? The town with the largest debt said, just what does debt have to do with shared services? I said, well, it's not so much shared services, but of course you're consolidating. You're not going to want to consolidate with a town that's up to its ears in debt. The town with the highest legal bill said, well, how much is the county paying for legal expenses? Why are you looking at legal expenses? So it ran, there were some people that complained, but most people looked at it and were happy to have it because it gave them an opportunity to examine how they were doing, what other towns are doing. Some mayors, simply confessed to spending hours looking at the thing and analyzing it. So the response was generally positive, and that's largely because I think they understood that we were trying to lower property taxes and not a gadfly in the audience poking a stick in their eye about how poorly they're doing. So I think the reaction was muted because they understood maybe my background as being a small-town mayor being one of them, they understood what we were trying to do, and they accepted the fact that there was going to be some repercussions.
Any action taking a result, or is it
Sure.
still in the study stage?
Oh, we're still in the study stage on some things, but we have seen one town is looking to do its police force and regionalize with neighboring communities. We've seen several towns talking about consolidation, doing a study, which was shocking. 2 years ago, the governor, of course, I guess more than that, 2 years ago, several years ago, Forsyth cut aid on the basis of population. And my town being below 5,000, I was down there with my pitchfork in hand, in Trenton, testifying before the Assembly Budget Committee and the Senate Budget Committee about how the small towns are more efficient, how dare you even suggest consolidation. And I had, my neighboring mayors right behind me. We just did a seminar about consolidation, brought up the database and showed them some models. And afterwards, they're like, this might be what we have to do moving forward. So I think the 2% cap, continuing growth in property taxes, there's a definite change in mindset from the people about how we're going to construct our municipalities going forward, and if we really need 566 political entities moving forward.
Has there been any similar progress at the county level? I know in my town, county taxes we pay are higher than our municipal, and they've been talking about passing
we are going to do we're going to do county budgets online probably this summer, but we're getting one of the municipalities out of the way first. But that's another piece of the project, and it's our focus right now is to get to 566. So.
I did have one of the mayors, one of the towns who does not come out looking particularly well on this database, asking whether to compare 100 counties to the other 20 counties. So, yes, people definitely want to see the information too.
That actually was my question, is if someone in Morris or Monmouth County wants to do a similar database, would they use your database, town stats, would you consult, or
Well,
give us the Excel sheet and say, go with
I mean,
it,
it's
go
funny you mention
Brad
that.
Prosper?
I contacted Mark because I don't like spending my Saturday mornings away from my kids punching in budget information. And if Mark can find somebody from Rutgers or somewhere that with the funding he's able to tap to do that kind of work, then let them do it and I'll just utilize it. And we've talked about different ideas that we can use to sort of take what we've done, what they're doing, and enhance it and improve it. And I don't have any, this isn't copyrighted, it's not going to be public to look at. If they want to take my data sheet, steal it, use it, that's fine. If you want to, you can take the Excel spreadsheet and you can do a replace function, and you can replace Hampton for Haddonfield or for Glen Gardner for Garfield, and you can take it to any county and substitute the names and put in your own data. And the template it's a template. And I don't know if too many counties have more than 26 municipalities, so there's probably enough space there for any county to do it. If you wanted to do it, what's that? Oregon, of course, yes, exactly.
But you started with the
Yeah, I mean, it's like open source. We regard ourselves as like open source. We'll share software. We'll share. The other thing is that there's a third database coming. I don't think Pasadena is up yet in Camden, is it? Camden County apparently has a database where they're focusing on shared services, and this is obviously we have a Republican county, and 100 in Camden's Democratic, where they are loading into their database when the retirement dates are of all the key functions, so that you can say, okay, the clerks of these 3 towns are scheduled to, 2 of them are scheduled to retire in 2015 and 2016, and the police chiefs will be out at X date. Maybe we should be phasing stuff in that way. So I mean, and they're looking heavily at more heavily on the vendor side, for example, than I think 100 it is. So I mean, there are various models out there. Morris County, there's a group called GEM, Government Efficiency and Management Group, run by Tim Smith, who's a councilman up in Mount Olive? Someplace in Roxbury. He's putting together his database. So I mean, there are a lot of models out there. Everyone who's working in this field is more than willing to share and to advise and to provide advice and ideas.
I'm speaking of Warren County, which is the next county north of us. At the invitation of Freeholders, Jason Sarnosky, who has a database, and he's going to do the same thing in Warren County. So, right.
I've been looking at doing one with the public school systems with Jersey City, the different schools to do comparison. So if I could talk to someone.
Oh, sure. Talk with us about it, but one of the reasons that we did municipal budgets is because the school report card, the data on school districts that's made available by the state is so far beyond what the state requires of the school districts is far beyond what's required of counties or municipalities. If you go to the school report cards, you're going to find a lot of stuff.
I will have to talk to you guys.
Okay, there is an amazing amount that is online, and we'll add that eventually to our website, but it's just basically aggregating what is already there. It's already there.
To coincide with style and stuff.
Okay.
That might be beneficial.
Sure. Yeah. Back.
I think the town stats is a great website. It's good to compare towns. But it doesn't have all the information that would be on the budget sheet. And I think that if we're doing a story, you really should look at the primary document. Is there a way to get, since you already have access to all these budgets, to have them available, the full budget available as a PDF on the site? So if you want to dig deeper, you'd be able to do that.
We are going to link. We we have not done it yet, but we are going to provide links eventually, excuse me, directly off of our site to all the PDF budgets that are available. A search trick, by the way, the easiest way to find a budget online is to punch up a municipal data sheet, because that is what they're called when they go to DCA, and your town. So if you punched up a Verona municipal data sheet 2010, you often have in the first 4 or 5 things on a Google search. It will take you straight to the budget. If you go to the website of the town, most budgets are not only a homepage, they will be under, at least half the budgets you'll find will be under the apartments, and they'll be under finance, and it'll come off the finance page. So part of this is knowing where to look for the budgets. Not all budgets are available. People didn't ask how we picked what to do first. We picked the ones that are available first. We may have to open at least, we will probably have to open the last 150 budgets, which is a real pain. But anyway, yeah.
Do you intend to put additional municipalities into your website, or are you sticking with 172?
No, we're posting on an ongoing basis. I'll have another 15 up by Friday, but we're doing them on an ongoing basis. We're trying to do it. We tried to do our 172 municipalities probably cover 60% of the population of the state currently. We're trying to do some of the larger ones first, but we will, by early June, we'll have all 566 2010 budgets up, and we hope to have the 2011s up by the end of the summer. Yeah.
In the spirit of cooperation, if a citizen journalist is concerned about their town and can spare you the trouble of overing the budget and send it to you,
Yes.
would that get it higher on your queue?
Anyone who wants, anyone wants to send a PDF of their budget over to me, it will be done within the following week. Because, frankly, I've had editors at a weekly newspapers that said, hey, for example, Verona and Cedar Grove were not available online, and they said, if I get you the PDFs, I can get them done. I said, send them over. She sent them over. They were up the following week. We up them at the top of the list. So if anybody's budget is not on the list of 172 and you want to get it there, and it's not available online, if you get a PDF over to me, we'll get up there very quickly. Yeah.
My name is Hugh Sharkey. What you're doing is excellent. I just wanted to give you my card. I was
right, when you talked earlier.
Interested in this heavily. I was councilman at one point for 3 years, no 5, and I did something similar to this on 3 local towns, comparing dispatch costs, and I got chastised and beat up because I was a public enemy putting up information like that on the website, HughSharkeyCPA.com. But what's interesting is that 5 years later, they did eventually go into a shared dispatch arrangement and are starting to save money. Meanwhile, we spent about $1 million over the last 5 years by not having a shared dispatch arrangement. But there is a way to get the budget information and actual cost information in one document, and it's through the accounting software that this town used. And I'm familiar with Edmonds, is what one of the towns, a number of towns use, and you can pull that data document, the PDF file, and read it with software, what is software, and put it into a Excel or a format that's more usable. So it's just a recommendation that there's a lot, easy way to now take data and bring it into the databases that you're looking for. So I think that's
it. Just to follow up on that, that's one of the things we've been told that there are really only 3 or 4 or 5 audit software systems in the state that the municipalities that the auditors are using, the accountants are using, and it would be fairly easy for them to adapt their software to do whatever we came up with as the easy-to-use budget, because you would not be asking all these municipalities to do this individually or come up with it individually. The few large firms would basically develop this.
I just want to follow up on the idea about some of the journalists filing the OPA requests, you can, and there is a regulation through the GRC that you can file an OPA request for this accounting information in a data file, PDF file format. So it is openable. You can get the document and make the OPA request. Unfortunately, CFOs the towns aren't going to be too happy where you get every piece of information that they ever check vouch that they got, but you can get it, and it's, my only other recommendation or comment would be is to ask for multiple years, like 2 or 3 years, so that for comparative purposes, you can compare one year to the next, like trending. So it's, you know, it can be done. It's not.
Just to follow up, one of the things that's a difficulty here for DCA, DCA has like all the budgets on paper. So I mean, you would they actually have to scan the budget if the request goes into community affairs, or the municipality hopefully has it, but they often don't have it scanned either. So I mean, it's there are a lot of costs to not having this system fixed, basically, in the long run. And I think it makes it difficult for DCA also when they're asked to get information or provide information on a particular town that you don't have it in electronic format, right? I mean,
And just here's a little shocking fact. Most people don't know, as Mark knows it, but we actually do hand enter some of the data that comes in on the budgets in our shop, which is just truly outdated. But I'm always hesitant to do anything with it because there's errors that are made in the hand entering of data, so it's not always as reliable. But we actually do have a lot of what's entered into the budgets in electronic form, at least the portions of the budget. So.
I mean, think about it is, I mean, there are certainly, I'm sure that our budgets, we do checks and so on, but I mean, we're doing these manually. We think they're pretty good. We tell people we think they're at 98% accurate, and that would be fine if it is. But I mean, but basically, the electronic filing, having the electronic filing will mean that the towns are filing what they believe in their best judgment is what the actual numbers are. And then and the other thing is they can apportion them by a cost area. So for example, we occasionally have budget items that are listed for general government, but clearly are under land use. We're putting them under land use, but we're making a judgment calls. We would rather that the towns make the judgment calls on where that spending ought to be apportioned. Yeah, Charlie?
I guess I'm directed towards Mr. Neff. Sort of everything that's been discussed here sort of touches on open government, people wanting access to information, how do you use that information. A lot of it seems like, how do you rip this out of people's hands so people can share the information. And it just makes sense now in the 21st century that the state can maybe use the stick and the carrot combined and tie state aid to becoming a certified open government. There's lots of different certifications. There's an environment. There's a lot of things that the state tries to encourage towns. Hey, get the certification. There's a little money in it for you. An open government does seem, everyone has been discussing the information that would be accessible. It would actually be more cost efficient to just have this information up so we don't have 30 of the same old requests coming into a town, people having to stop their work. It just makes economic sense, it makes pragmatic sense. There's so many benefits, and I'm just curious as to why the state doesn't use a little bit of muscle to encourage people to do that, encourage towns to do that.
We do to some extent. I'll give you a couple examples.
You're not going to mention that the budget's online now, because that's so 1990s.
No. So, for example, one of the things we do with the local finance board is if a municipality comes in and they want to create an authority. In the past, if they were given approval to create an authority, they were just allowed to create their authority because it was the right thing to do, or believed it was a good thing to do. But there weren't really many conditions or strings tied to it. And last month at our meeting, we had an authority creation in Vernon Township. And one of the things we did was said, we're going to give you approval for this, but we're going to condition it things like for municipalities that come in and ask for transitional aid, it's a discretionary aid that we can give to towns that are having difficulties. We require them to give us an awful lot of data, and we put it up on the internet. We put their applications up on the internet so people can see it. And that is sort of a user-friendly budget for them, and a narrative of what's going on in their budgets. Now, it's written by people who are looking for money, so sometimes it has the best spin positive. But we are to the extent we can, we're using the conditioning approvals and things on a little bit more disclosure. The hammer is more difficult because there is state mandate, state pay issues of just telling municipalities they have to do X or they have to do Y. Usually entails that we have to pay for it. And at a time when the state's budget is as bad shape as it is, you like to do everything. Sometimes you can't afford everything you want to do. But that is our mindset, is to try and use both the hammer when we can, or conditions when we can, of getting aid or approvals, to make them be a little bit more open and accessible.
And the other thing is that the state website in the last couple of years has certainly gotten much more detailed and a lot better, especially the budget side at Treasury. And frankly, DCA has been, one of the great things is that DCA has maintained a lot of these statistics back to 1998, and they're available on the state webpage on Excel. Everything that was in our property tax information and state aid sections is right from the DCA website, and it goes back to 1998. So there is a lot there. It's just the municipal budget that is the huge gap. Any question back?
Yeah, just again, probably the DCA, but just to sort of follow up on open government and the low-cost items that could possibly be required. I mean, I think the collective bargaining agreements are required to be on the PERC website. Well, I think one of the big things would be individual agreements, if they were required to be on the local website. And I think it's a great place for stories for those of you who are the journalists in the room. I happen to live in Monmouth County, where someone got a hold of the community college president's contract, which I don't know why no one got that contract before. It was online, and we have 8 million people looking at these different contracts. But that contract showed golf membership, tuition for kids, graduate school tuition for kids. I mean, just an endless stream of things. And if all contracts were required to just be posted online, which is almost costless, we could look at everyone that has an individual contract, whether it's a superintendent of schools, police chief, et cetera, and people wouldn't put those things in contracts if they know that everybody in the town could read them, the next day that it goes on. So again, I don't know if the DCA is the right place. It seems like a great place to make that requirement for legislation, and I guess that's what I just like a comment from you on.
I couldn't agree more. Those are the contracts that are the most abused. I've offered many of them myself, and I remember offering the deputy superintendent's contract in a certain municipality where the deputy superintendent happened to also be a state senator, and looked at his contract, and the deputy was paid more than the superintendent was, and it had all sorts of outrageous perks in it. You're correct. I mean, but again, for us to mandate that every municipality put them online, or mandate that they be made available, we'll get pushback on a state and state pay issue. Maybe it's something that we can require when we go through our, whenever we're giving state aid or other approvals. Maybe that's a way to make them do it without the state mandate, state pay issue being violated. I love that idea. I think it's a good idea.
Second first, the audience question.
No, I was just thinking about the dirty little secret. Do you pay for the municipalities to prepare their budgets and submit them to the state?
No, state mandate, state pay was something that came into being in, I think, 1997.
Make it a condition of an acceptable budget that is submitted in PDF form.
It would be.
It's not acceptable if it isn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, currently, right now, every municipality is required, and this could be contested as state. They are required to put them on the internet. Every municipality is required to put their budget on the internet for the current year and the prior 2 years.
If they have a website.
So it should have 3 years. That's a recent change. But
January
when it comes to just, we can't condition the acceptance of budgets on whatever we want to condition them on within reason, because the extent that we start new regulations requiring things that cost money, or we'll eventually get a challenge on something like that. So it is something that we'll consider as we go forward, and we'll look at it, but it's not going to be a be-all. We can't just mandate that everybody do whatever they want.
Regarding the contracts, part of that and part of that would be review of the public school budget. Confidentiality clauses are really shoved into it that we're not allowed to review and see them. So part of the negotiations with the contracts, one party is saying it's got to be confidential, it's got to be confidential. And obviously the person wants it confidential because they don't want someone to see how much they're being paid.
The contract is confidential?
Well,
You could challenge that one.
You
can challenge that.
We're being told that only certain people are allowed to view it, we're not allowed to pass it on, so that seems to be an issue.
It's a public record, it's a public dollars, it's a public record.
I don't
You
think.
should be able to get that. Just one more. and then- Last one about, any question?
There's some towns that do have websites, but their budget is not online.
Yes.
What is the penalty for them not following the law?
Right now, I'm not aware of what the penalty is, or is it's a recent law. We'll have to do spot checks to see whether there's compliance or not. I'm assuming that there is. For towns that don't have websites, the division puts the budgets on the website for them. But if we start seeing that's a real problem, then we'll have to figure that out. Right now, there's no set penalty.
Just to be fair, the number of budgets that have gone online in the last month has been a fairly substantial. I suspect many of the towns are waiting for their budgets to go through like April and May, and then they'll do all that three together. That's why
But usually, a simple phone call sort of nudges them. They'll,
it can.
if they know that people are looking for it, they're usually good about putting it up. They just don't like tending the websites a whole lot. That's basically it.